Now we will take our hair particle systems and get them into Unreal Engine. I will show you how to import the hair, how to attach it to your MetaHuman character, and how to change the behavior and look of the hair. Before exporting, let's have a quick look at what we actually have here. We have first created the top hair, which consists of a number of different planes that function as hair emitters. Then we have the head mesh that has 4 hair particle systems: the short hair, 2 breakaway hair layers, and the flyaway hair. One thing to pay attention to is the number of children. I sometimes forget to set the render amount to the same number that I use for the display amount. So, if you see discrepancies in the look of the hair between what you see in the viewport here and what you get in Unreal Engine, it might well be that your render amount has not been adjusted. And second, make sure the Show Emitter checkbox is deactivated for the head and the planes. Otherwise you will export the emitters along with the hair. When this is all set, we can now select all emitters, which is the head mesh and the planes for the top hair, then go to Export and choose Alembic. Let's go through the export settings. First of all, the scale. You might have already noticed that when you import your OBJ character mesh from Meshmorpher, its scale is very big. It's actually 100 times bigger than the normal size. So when we export the hair, we can leave the scale at 1. If your head mesh is scaled to the normal size, you might have to set the scale to 100. This setting is no deal breaker, by the way. You can always change the transformation of your assets in the import settings in Unreal. If the scale or rotation of the imported asset is off, you can simply change the transformation settings and re-import. Next, we don't have any animation here, so we set frame start and end to 1. A very important setting is this part here. Also, there is a small difference between Blender 2.9 and Blender 3.0 for these settings. Let me quickly show you what those are. Let's start with Blender 2.9. Your options here are Selected Objects, Renderable Objects, and Visible Objects. We always want to check Selected Objects, but there is a difference between what happens when you choose either of the other two. I will export both options and then re-import them in Blender. If you select renderable objects, for some reason Blender will export the emitter objects, so in our case the head and planes, along with the hair. Only the visible objects option does what we needed to do and exports the hair only. In Blender 3.0 we don't have the renderable objects option anymore. So we check selected objects and visible objects. And the neat thing in Blender 3.0 is that they introduced this option here where you can select which settings you want to use. This refers to your settings in the particle details panel here. You can choose either one, but just make sure that the corresponding show emitter setting for the hair is deactivated. Since I created my hair in 2.93, I will export with these settings, selected objects and visible objects ticked. We can leave all the rest of the settings on default. You see here at the bottom that the hair particles will be exported. We can now open up our Unreal Engine project. First, we need to activate the plugin that will allow us to import groom assets. Open the plugin settings and search for Alembic. Activate the Alembic Groom Importer plugin and restart the engine. Now let's create a new folder for the hair and drag and drop our exported Alembic file into it. You should see this import dialog window. In case you see something different, like the normal Alembic import dialog, then you need to look into your export settings in Blender again. It might be that you have exported the head mesh along with the hair. Depending on the orientation of your mesh in Blender, you might need to adjust the transformation settings here. I will leave them on default for now to show you how to adjust them after importing. Now let's open up the hair asset. Everything looks good so far except for the rotation. If we drop the asset into the level, we can check what we need to adjust. So apparently we need to rotate it along the Z and the X axis. Also, if we look at the hair closely, the part where I removed some hair for the scar on the left temple seems to be on the right side. so we also need to flip it. Right-click on the hair asset and select Re-import with new file. Now let's set the X rotation to 90 and the Z rotation to -90 and the scale to -1 on the Y-axis in order to flip it, and click Import. Yep, the orientation is now fixed and we can proceed with attaching the hair to the character. For this I will open up the hero blueprint, and in the blueprint components, let's select the hair component and under Groom search for our imported hero hair asset. That's not how it's supposed to look like. So the reason why it might look clipped and all weird like in my case is that the settings for the hair were pre-adjusted. Especially the hair clip length has something to do with it. Just click on the little arrow here to reset the value and boom, we now see what we would expect to see. Although the hair is now part of the character blueprint, it is not actually attached to the head yet. The fix is quite easy. Just right-click on the hair asset and create a binding asset. Choose your head mesh as the target and click Create. Back in the blueprint, simply assign the newly created binding asset in the Groom settings. Now, the hair follows along with the character movements, and not only that, it also responds to the facial deformations. Right, now let's have a look at the options we have to adjust the look of the hair. Open the material instance from the blueprint and play around with the customization options the MetaHuman hair shader provides. For example, you can change the saturation, the melanin concentration, whiteness, or even dye the hair in any color you want. The hair asset itself also comes with a lot of customization options. In the Strands tab, for example, you can adjust the hair thickness, root and tip scales, shadow density and other things. Since Groom assets are quite heavy on performance, you can even quickly set up an LOD system for your hair. In the LOD tab, you can click on the plus icon in the top right corner. Unreal will automatically set up reduction settings for the hair strands for each additional LOD, which you of course can also adjust to your liking. Now, let's check the LOD system in the viewport. Select the LOD sync component and instead of forcing LOD 0, set it to -1, which will activate the auto load system. If we move away from the character, you see how our hair gets reduced using the LODs we have just set up. It seems that apart from the hair, there are a couple of weird issues going on when LOD 1 or higher are activated, which we will need to fix. First, the textures on the head disappear as soon as the character goes to LOD 1. And second, the beard disappears quite quickly, which looks weird. The reason for the disappearing textures is that, in contrast to the body, the head actually uses different material instances for each LOD. So let's fix that first. Open up the head mesh and pick LOD 1. For the first material slot, choose the main head shader instead of the LOD 1 shader. Then go through all the other LODs and repeat the process. Alright, the disappearing texture is now fixed. For the beard, select the beard component in the blueprint and open up the Groom asset. In the LOD tab, you will see that for some reason the beard is set to non-visible for LOD 2 and higher, and the geometry type is set to cards. Let's change that. Activate visibility and set the geometry type to strands. Yes, now everything is fixed and our character is finally complete. Well guys, this concludes the first part of this course. You should now have a solid understanding of the whole workflow of customizing a MetaHuman character. In part 2, we will look into the pipeline of creating clothes and accessories, which is not necessarily specific to MetaHumans only, but can be applied to any character. If you have any feedback, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed the content so far, and see you in part 2 of the course.